neighbors of China that have had maritime or land border disputes with China, India has stood up to China. So, unlike what you have noticed China doing, for example, in South China Sea, inching gradually and piecemeal occupying the whole territory, that strategy has not worked with India. And because India has stood up to China and defended what we think is our territory, Chinese have now started another strategy, which is to use their deep pockets in now competing in terms of staying power. So they wish that both sides will continue to bear enormous amount of responsibility of forward deployments, but simultaneously also building enormous amount of infrastructure because it is a long haul game now. And in that sense, one can only say, as Defense Minister has put it on the record himself, here is an issue of difference of perceptions, and then each side has its own leverages that they are bringing forward and using, and that is seeing China building enormous amount of infrastructure on their side, and India also building infrastructure on our side. And these other issues of staple visas or all kinds of other recent revelations of two leaders having mentioned or not mentioned seeking a resolution of border dispute at Bali, these are part of those irritations that come out of the fundamental problem of a disputed boundary on which both sides treat that issue as matter of national sovereignty. And therefore, territorial sovereignty being a preoccupation for both these nations has resulted in this long-drawn kind of dispute, which is defying all resolutions. And what we notice here is that this is not going to end very soon. And very quick point, Chinese are aware of India, being on verge of hosting the G20 summit meeting early September. And they are thinking that perhaps they have certain amount of leverage in bargaining with India to ensure that President Xi Jinping would join that summit meeting. India, as a hosting nation, would like to make sure all 20 national leaders and EU leaders join it. And therefore, these are part of irritations. I think India has to manage them very carefully. India has been managing very carefully in that sense. So one can't ratchet up the rhetoric at this moment. I think it is a time for a very quiet and subtle diplomacy to step in and make sure
Interesting you say this. On an international arena, China continues to peddle this lie about Arunachal Pradesh, about line of actual control, about... Okay, I'm being told Pratikruta is not here with me, but Professor Swaran Singh, then seeking a quick response from you about peddling the lies that China does in the international arena as well. And it continues to pinch India in the United Nations at the UNSC being a P5 member. It's unfortunate that India is not the P5 member any longer, a permanent member of the UNSC. There have been push that have been given by the Indians, by the Ministry of External Affairs, the Foreign Minister as well, and Prime Minister also speaking about it openly. But when either it comes to Jammu and Kashmir or it comes to Arunachal Pradesh, or even designating terrorists as global terrorists, prescribing them as global terrorists, that has also been a difficult task when China comes into being and tries to meddle in our affairs. How do we figure this out diplomatically?
First of all, let me mention this, that I don't think it is unfortunate that India is not part of UN Security Council. Increasingly, world is now questioning the credibility of United Nations, which is no longer seen as representative of the world that we live in. Compared to that, India's credibility and acceptance levels have really gone up, if you notice, last decade or so. That's point number one. Second, double speak is a normal thing that happens in international relations, and China is known for that double speak. They do different things than what they prescribe and profess. So India understands that. India deals with that at all different levels, as General Asthana said. It's not just one level of diplomacy alone. I mentioned both sides have been building their infrastructure. So India has also been building roads, building helipads, building tarmacs, connectivity. 25 villages were mentioned compared to China's 700 on the other side. So both sides are trying at various levels, and I think in that sense, India's rising stature and the mention recently by Prime Minister of India soon reaching to be the third largest economy. And that is where I will agree with Shailendra Singh. The lesson lies in making your own assets stronger.
Okay.
So if India becomes kind of a bigger, powerful economy tomorrow, like China today is of 18 trillion, I think that is where automatically a lot of things get resolved because other side understands the leverages that India will have then, and as it today understands the leverages that India has today. So in that sense, it's
Okay.
a constant work in progress. It is not something you can resolve overnight. It's going to be constant exercise to manage China. Even if we resolve one issue, there will be always other
Yeah.
issues.
No, that's a
Because
very
it's a
important
matter of-
point, sir, that you make, that as soon as India becomes a $10 trillion economy,